Hello, friends, and welcome to the Real G podcast. I'm your host, Gigi, and I have a very special guest with me today. His name is John Coyle.
Nice to be here. I'm John K. Coyle. I guess, amongst other things, I'm known for being the time guy or the time master because I speak and talk about time and chronoception, which we'll define later. I also happen to have here an Emmy, which I accidentally won a few weeks ago. We might talk about that, we might not. And I was a former Olympic speed skater, and right now I travel the world speaking and talking about time and how humans perceive and construct it in their brains. So that's a little bit of an intro.
Explain to us a little bit more in depth on what your definition of time is.
Well, so we have clock time, which the Greeks called chronos, but in English we only have one word for time, which is time, obviously. It's the most common word in the English language, and it's overused, sort of like the Inuit having only one word for snow, when I think they have 17. The Greeks had two words at least. They were better than us. They had chronos, which is clock time, the way we tend to think about time. Planes, trains, and automobiles running on time, but they had the word kairos, which they used about 67% of the time in all of Greek texts, which is human time, how we actually experience time. And the reality is we as humans, because our brain constructs time, don't experience time in a linear, chronological, chronos way. We actually experience it in ways where it speeds up, slows down, and stops. For example, if you ever said, I can't believe that was yesterday, it feels like last week. Can't believe that was last week, feels like yesterday. Can't believe that was last year, feels like last week.
Time flies.
So forth. The way we experience time, because the brain constructs our perception of time, is absolutely nonlinear, and there are ways to manipulate it in our favor. And we'll talk about that.
I like how you sped through your awards and everything you've achieved in your life, and it's very humble of you. But however, I'm curious to find out how your mind actually works and how you got to that place. Can you tell us a little bit on how you were as a child and what got you into Olympics, what got you into keep pursuing that feeling that you get when you get an award like that, or you get such a great achievement?
Well, I was fortunate to have some really great parents. So I was raised in a way that I had access to and support for competitive athletics. And so I was an active and very serious competitor in sports of cycling and speed skating. And so I went to the world championships in both of those, eventually won a silver medal in speed skating, which we have here. But what the thing that sort of evolved out of that is, in sports, the outcomes of sports, and my sports in particular, are hundreds or tenths of seconds, and that changes your entire life, right?
Right.
As Seinfeld puts it, gold, silver, bronze never hurt you. I mean, that's the reality, right? If you're fourth place in the Olympics, it just doesn't matter. And so what I realized later as I retired from sport at age 29, that's true in real life, that small moments determine the trajectories of our lives. It's not in minutes, it's not in months, it's not in years. For example, you said yes to the guy or you didn't. You avoided the accident or you didn't. You got off in the right accident or you didn't. You took the promotion or you didn't. You know, like, we make decisions in moments that affect the entire trajectory of our lives. And by the way, that is the definition of kairos, back to the Greek word. So kairos being used 67% of the time. The etymology is when everything happens at once and the trajectory is reset. And it comes from the archer releasing the arrow.
Kind of like a ripple effect.
Yes.
I like that. Were you kind of spiritual, or definitely spiritual as a child, or do you think that you just kind of evolved into thinking, having that depth of mind that you have?
I grew up very highly religious. I would say I'm not, what's the right word, professionally religious anymore. But the intuitions, the thoughts, the notion that there's powers and connections that we don't understand. The best metaphor I've ever heard, by the way, is that us trying to understand God is like trying to teach a chimpanzee the internet.
Absolutely.
Like, sure, but how could we possibly know?
Exactly. I believe that we're not necessarily meant to know all the answers to everything. We're meant to go on a journey and just experience that for ourselves. Otherwise, it would be too easy.
Fair enough. Yes. No, I mean, let's face it. We are defined by our struggles, right? Like, everything you are, everything that I've achieved came at the cost of struggling against things. And, you know, my personal motto is, I'll choose my suffering rather than let it choose me. meaning I will go out for a 3-hour bike ride in the sun rather than sit home and then feel like terrible about myself because I haven't exercised or I've not done some work or I've not gotten things done. Like, I would rather suffer first and have my pleasure later.
Do you think that the difference between successful people and people that are not is that simple choice of just acting in that immediate second and making that decision?
I think it's certainly one of the most predictive. I think some people are more blessed to have more capacity to suffer, if that makes sense. And that sucks if you don't have that, because life involves some suffering. And if you have a higher capacity to suffer, that means you're going to have the higher capacity to push through and achieve bigger and better things.
What I found, and what was one of my biggest ahas this week, is that everyone has a certain type of basic line resonance within us. It means we're vibrating at a default. And a lot of us don't know that we're vibrating in such a way that is affecting us in a negative way. And we're unconscious about that. So one of the things that I found is no matter how much you try, if you don't fix that, it might give you the results that you're not wanting with unconsciously.
100% agree. And let me give you a very sort of visceral, tangible evidence of that. Like, you can sit down with a slightly known acquaintance that you maybe have met before, and you can try to remember how many kids they have and what you talked about before, and 20 minutes in, you're like, dear Lord, is this almost over? Because you think 3 hours has gone by, right? Now, contrast that with a best friend, and you sit down and you start chatting for a few minutes, and you look and 3 hours has gone by.
Right.
And the other thing that's always true is you start right where you left off, right? That conversation from 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year, whatever it was, starts right where it was, because I believe, like you said, that you're working on a resonant frequency. And when you have the same frequency, you start right where you were. But per your point, if you're in some sort of cognitive dissonance, maybe you can't achieve that same frequency anymore, and that could create some difficulties for sure.
How would you then switch that into a resonance that is more of a higher vibration?
Well, so I have a whole talk on that, but I actually believe personally that if you spend, and there's some stats on this, if you spend at least a third of your day in flow or in your area of strengths, of doing things you do well, then you have triple the willpower of people that don't.
I absolutely believe in that. Absolutely. Let me ask you a few questions, and I brought some. You're going to get a few funny and, I don't know, surprise, and we'll see if... Okay, so what is the funniest thing that ever happened to you? We got to keep it fun here.
That's a tough one. What is the funniest thing that ever happened? There's been a lot of funny things that have happened to me. Well, I once... there's another time I almost died, so it's not completely funny, but it is funny. It gets funny. I was hitchhiking through Europe, and I got dropped off in the middle of nowhere, and I had to bury myself in a haystack overnight.
Oh my God.
To survive, because it was freezing rain. So I was sopped to the core, and looked like the Tin Man, and so I buried myself in hay. But the next day, when I showed up to a World Cup for speed skating, and I was already wearing my skin suits because that's what I was wearing the night before, and I showed up and I started skating some laps.
Oh my God.
And one of the older skaters came up and was like, John, there's a problem. There's grass coming off you. So I had to go change my skin suit. So for the rest of my life, when I see these Dutch skaters, they still call me Grasshopper.
Grasshopper. Oh my gosh, that is pretty funny. You have cats.
Yes.
And you keep mentioning when the time I almost died. How many lives do you have left?
Well, I'm trying not to die, but last summer, after nearly killing myself helicopter skiing in Alaska, and having my first injury of my whole life, actually, I was stuck at home for 2 months, and I wrote a book called Why Am I Still Alive? The 55 Times I've Almost Died. Subsequent title change to 56 because of the recent
56
desert experience, but yeah, I'm hoping we stick maybe under 60.
So that's another question that I have. You talk about time a lot and how you could live 100 years in just a short period of time. How do you spend your time?
So the deep dive there is that because the brain constructs time and the brain is biased, it's causing time to speed up for 98% of adults. So 98% of adults feel summers were far longer when they were kids than they are now. But that's a cognitive bias. There's still 1,884,000 seconds in a summer, same as when you're 8. So what I've been able to sort of pull out of the neuroscience and psychology of time perception is when the brain constructs time, it does it in a very specific way. And so your hippocampus, my hippocampus, is a bad part of your brain. It's by the basal ganglia. Anyways, it's sweeping short-term memory to long-term memory about every 2 to 3 seconds. So think of it making a photograph that also has sound and emotions to it. But it's 70% visual. So you're making a stack of these pictures, right? Now, when something exciting happens, interesting, unique, different, scary, fun, your brain starts to write memories 20 to 30 to 40 times faster, and it puts those photographs to the top. So this is why time seems to slow down when something really intense happens, like a car crash or you're about to ask somebody out, for example. It also explains why those memories are highly recallable, because the amygdala, which sits next to the hippocampus, is the one that tells it to write these memories, and it does so for 2 reasons only. Never do that again, or always do that again. Don't die, procreate. That's literally its entire service for memory making. So memory making really is at its most base, and it's far more complex, but at its most base is keep you alive so you can procreate. Now, it's far more majestic and complex than that, but that's when memories can get really intense, and that's when they're highly recallable, and this is unfortunate because bad memories are just as highly recallable as good ones.
Yes. So what is a normal day for you?
I vary between, so one thing we know about stress and recovery, and it comes from athletics, but it's true for psychological stress as well, is that episodic stress is really good for us. You can call it U-stress as well, U-shaped stress. So when I'm home, I tend to be pretty nested. I have a garden right here, indoor hardwood. I live alone and I run my dishwasher every day. So I cook a lot. I tend not to go out a lot because when I'm traveling, which is about 100 days a year, and I go to the Middle East a lot and overseas into wild locations, it can get pretty intense. And so I don't sleep a lot. It's very stressful a lot just because it's new and different. So I tend to be nesting here and adventuring there, sleeping very little and meeting lots of people and having adventures.
What I've noticed after studying a certain amount of people that have achieved success is that their time alone is very necessary, extremely necessary. You need time because the best relationship we could have is with ourselves. And so you need time alone to recuperate, to gather your thoughts, to kind of sort everything out in your mind, and to go back into the flow, like you said.
Right.
So I find that very interesting that almost every single person that has achieved an amount of success spends a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
What is one advice that you would give out there to everyone if they want to live their best life?
I mean, for me, because I think time is our most valuable commodity, not money, not anything else. I mean, time and love, I would sort of conflate. I'm sorry, time and love, I would conflate. Like, time is love and love is time. Like, the greatest gift you can give to somebody is your time. The greatest gift they can do you is their time. And so, when it comes to understanding how time works in the brain, number one advice is when life gives you choices, choose the one that makes the best story. Not the most fun, not the easiest, the one that makes the best story, because we are wired to remember stories. And when you get to tell stories, it expands your perception of time.
That's absolutely true. I sent you one of my speeches on time, and I think it's kind of similar to what you just said, that love kind of stops time.
Yes, fair enough.
Yeah, so we agree on that.
Yes, we do.
Pretty interesting how sometimes we could be so far not know each other and then have the same ideas, right?
Well, if you think about it, like back to making it a little more basic, but not really, but if the amygdala sitting there next to the hippocampus causing you to write memories causes your frame rate to go up and memories to be more highly recallable, love is the highest form of emotion. Like, it's the highest form. So of course, love is going to expand time. Like, those moments, those first romantic moments, and sometimes even much later, like when you have those incredible epiphanies between two human beings. I don't know that there's a lot better in life than that.
I agree with you. I agree. Let me see if I have another question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, kind of asked that question. This, I think you answered this question, but it's, what is your definition of success?
For me now, it is time expansion, like time dilation, having more and more time expanding experiences such that, I don't live 50 more years, I live 500. And it's no joke, like I'm literally 25 years into 2023. That's like the way it feels compared to 10 years ago. Even compared to summers as an 8-year-old, this summer is vastly longer because I've figured out how to design the kinds of experiences that lead to memorable moments that are then stored and recalled, and they become expansive.
It's so funny how the definition of success has changed for everyone over time. I remember 20 years ago, the definition of success was whether you owned a Lamborghini,
Right.
The house, the Louis Vuitton. Now everyone is more of just living life and being full of joy, having happy moments, having experiences rather than,
I have a theory about this, if you'd like to know.
Yes, absolutely.
So up until the internet, I would say that success bought you time. Because, lights went out at 6, you were gone, you went home 30 years ago, maybe whatever it is, but 25. And so if you had the capacity to have a Louis Vuitton bag, it also meant you could go on long vacations. It also meant you spent more time away from the office, not less. It also meant that you had a car that you could go explore and spend a day and not go to the office. And that has changed. It's inverted now because the most successful people have no time. And I think there's time poverty amongst the most wealthy people. They have no time. And the middle class is probably in the best place because they got enough, they're doing their 40 hours and they check out and they go on vacation. And then, the poor have the inverse problem, right? They have to work 2 jobs to be able to pay the bills. So it's sort of a U-shaped time poverty thing where people that are actually poor have time poverty, people that are middle class have some excess of time, and people that are really rich, by and large, have another form of time poverty. And time and money are fungible, right? You can trade your time for money. We all do that. But we should be trading, particularly if you're wealthy, your money for time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting how things are now changing, that we have so much knowledge and information out there that people are becoming more aware of what's really valuable for them and what is not.
Right. Slowly.
I
think there's a strong drive and intuitional need for people to succeed and drive. And that's good. I think that's particularly good in your 20s and 30s, before you're in that long-term relationship, before you have children. But then that starts to invert. It starts to be the notion of how do I leverage my money and time in the appropriate way, invest them properly. I think that's the right word, invest. And a lot of successful people I know are either A, single at an advancing years and haven't found the time to go date, right? Or B, they're still working crazy hours and ignoring their families, which is a complete lot. Like, what are we here for, right?
Right.
Like, you have all this money, you have 4 houses that you never visit. What's the point?
I think now there's a lot more single people for a lot of reasons. In that sort of successful group that you have there, it's kind of difficult to date in the first place.
Right.
You want to have somebody that matches your vibration, that matches you and everything. But I agree 100% that a lot of successful people just don't make the time for what's really important in life.
Right.
And they just choose not to.
Right. And what are they doing all this for?
Right.
Who's enjoying the Lamborghini with them? Like,
right.
What's the point?
Yeah. We could go into long conversations about my thoughts about that. But that's another episode.
For sure. That's fine.
Anything else you'd like to add?
The other thing that I think we know from neuroscience that's true is, if the first law is that when life gives you choices, choose the one that makes the best story. I think the second one is life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. If you're not occasionally taking the kind of risks that put you on edge, your amygdala's not going to wake up. You're not going to record those moments. Like, entrepreneurs are lucky this way. I think that their life provides them plenty of risk. But if you're in corporate America, I think can be a pretty safe, comfortable existence where you go to the same job, same people, same coworkers, same places on vacation, same places to eat, and suddenly even the hippocampus stops writing. Like, if you ever got to the parking garage and you don't know how you got there, well, you're basically dead because your brain's just not writing anything down because it's very lazy.
Are you talking about me?
No, not you.
I forget where I'm parked all the time.
That's different. If you don't know how you got there, that's different. Like, do you go on autopilot and you arrive somewhere and you don't remember how you got there? That means your brain didn't write anything down. And if it doesn't write anything down, I would argue you're actually dead. You're not even alive.
Yeah.
So 3% of your mass, your brain, 28% of your calorie burn. So this thing is a giant light bulb, burning energy. The hardest thing the brain does is write memory, so it doesn't want to do it. It's lazy. It wants you to live a safe, comfortable, routine life and have to write nothing down and just procreate and have some kids and get off. But that's not the way to live a full life.
No, absolutely. We live for experiences.
Right.
Right?
Not things.
Not things. Thank you so much for allowing us to interview you and letting us know about the Emmy. Not a big deal, by the way, but is there anything that you would like to tell us about your new projects, anything new coming up?
I'll tell you about one thing I'm working on, which I've been working on for 8 years now, which is my next book, which is called Counterclockwise: How to Design Endless Summers. And so it's all of the neuroscience and psychology of time perception. And very specifically, it's a prescriptive book, the only of its kind, to teach you how to slow, stop, and reverse the perceived acceleration of time that most adults feel and experience the endless summers of youth again. But to conclude, I'm going to tell you a story. It's one of my favorites. It's in my other book here, Design for Strengths, but it's about how you can not only design moments to expand time for yourself, but you can gift them to others. So I'm going to tell you about probably the most important moment of my life, honestly. It's the only reason we're sitting here right now. So I was at the Olympics in '94. I trained for another 4 years for the next Olympics, and I didn't make the team. And I was so humiliated, I'll use that word specifically, that I got off the ice. I didn't put on my skate guards. I walked across the concrete with my blades, knowing I'd never skate again. Got in my car, I drove to Phoenix, Arizona, had nothing to do with the sport ever again because I was, in my head, a one-timer first loser. So one Olympics only, second place, which, in hindsight, is kind of stupid. But that's the way I felt for almost a decade. And then NBC asked me to be the analyst for the next Olympics in 2006. And so I couldn't say no to that. So I'm back at the Olympics. And my job was to interview the parents, coaches, and skaters and bring them the backstories for them to talk about. And so I was warmly welcomed back. They all knew me. I knew most of them. But on the 16th day of the 17 days of the Winter Olympics, a parent pulled me aside and in about 20 seconds gave me a Kairos moment, a moment that changed the trajectory of my life. And again, it's the only reason I'm here. So we're at dinner. It's the night before the gold medal round in my sport. And he says to me, "John, I need to tell you something. The only reason we're here right now is because of you." And I said, "I don't know what you mean." He's like, "You won't remember, but 12 years ago, after you won your silver medal, you brought it to a little reception in Bay City, Michigan. You put your medal around my son's neck, Alex. He was 11 years old at the time. He'd never skated before in his life. And now 12 years later, tomorrow, he is in the gold medal final."
Oh my gosh. That gave me chills. That's a beautiful story.
And just like that, everything changed. To be fair, all I do now for a living is I speak for a living, and I tell this story. I've told it in more than 19 countries to more than 1 million people. That was the gift of a moment that changed the trajectory of my life.
Oh my gosh. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for watching our very first podcast. It is very exciting to continue on this journey. And thank you, John, again, for allowing me to interview you.
Super
I
fun.
hope you had fun. And we'll see you guys next time.